Hey, Michael Paris here. I am on Potato Chip Rock hike in San Diego, California, and I was recently asked a question online whether I believe life is intrinsically uncertain. So before I answer that question, it's important that we discuss what does that actually mean. To say life is intrinsically uncertain means that if we dig deep enough into the fabric of our universe, we reach a certain point where all our tools to derive knowledge just break down and our ability to model is limited. At some point, there's just some element of uncertainty that we just have to learn to live with. Mathematics has proven to be our most useful tool for understanding the universe and deriving knowledge, precisely for the reason that it allows us to model systems, to make confident predictions about the future. All we require is certain conditions, like variables, and then we can get an output which tells us how things would behave like given those conditions. However, without trying to make things more complicated than they need to be, the mathematical models at a quantum mechanical level are one of our strongest in physics to date. What these mathematical systems state is that life is more probabilistic, where a particle can be in some place at some point in time, but it doesn't tell you for sure it will be. Or another example would be, the more you know about the momentum of a particle, the less you must know about its position. Now, the argument that life is intrinsically uncertain implies that our use for mathematics at some point eventually breaks down, in which we can have an experiment, which we have the same exact conditions, but we will have a different outcome every time. So now, do I believe that life is intrinsically uncertain? So I don't think it really matters what I believe. I just don't feel like anyone in this world at this point has enough information to make a confident prediction. So this is pure speculation. I don't believe life is intrinsically uncertain, and I still subscribe to Einstein's no longer supported notion that life is objective at its core. That being said, when we observe the data that we derive from quantum mechanical tests, we are observing this data through a very misleading lens. From a philosophical perspective, we don't understand the system we are observing, and that's a very powerful point right here. There are all these elements: time, consciousness, quantum mechanics, that are higher dimensions, that are all kind of meshed together, and we're working in isolation trying to figure things out. And it makes it very hard for us to understand one point of the system without understanding the entire system. And I believe that this is one of the reasons why quantum mechanics seems so much more complicated than it actually is. And I'll give you an example. Imagine you and I lived in a two-dimensional world called Flatland, where there was no depth, just left to right, forward, backward. And in this world, there were many two-dimensional scientists. And in the world above us, which would be a three-dimensional world, it would occasionally rain. And as rain would enter this two-dimensional world, it would pop in and out of existence, right? The circle would get bigger, 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 then it would get smaller, 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 until it would just disappear. And you would have all these scientists scratching their head. Some would argue that, hey, this world is just magical. Some would argue that it must be God doing it. Others would argue that, and the clever ones would scratch their head and say, wait, there's a way I can make a prediction. I can statistically break it out that at this time of year, when it rains more than normal, you would see these raindrops pop in and out of existence. So if you look at this spot, there is a 10% chance that rain will appear. And he'd be right, and the math would support it, and we'd do all these sorts of tests, and it would work perfectly. So these scientists would say, hey, as you can see, life is intrinsically uncertain. We can only describe life as a probabilistic function, not as an objective mathematical equality. In conclusion, I don't believe life is intrinsically uncertain. I don't believe life is complex at its core. I believe life overall is very simplistic. The reason why it seems complex is because we are reverse engineering the process. We are looking at the result and trying to backtrack to what the rules actually are, instead of looking at the rules and then observing the results. And this is just the way it is.